Heading into week 5 of the fantasy football season, I'm giving you my starts and sits at the wide receiver position this week. Do us a favor, drop a like, subscribe, and why don't you comment down below who your most confident fringe start is. Now, obviously, the point of this video is not to give you names like Davante Adams, Justin Jefferson. We're going to try and find those guys who might be on the edge and give you confidence to start or sit them. My first start of the week is Chris Olave, a guy that I've been advocating for you guys to trade for a couple weeks ago. They go up against Seattle, who currently gives up the 7th fewest points to the position, but I think context is really important there. You have to remember that the most difficult opponents thus far have kind of struggled. So they faced Russell Wilson in week 1, who didn't look good, Jimmy G's first game back in week 2, Marcus Mariota in week 3, so they really haven't had like a true competent offense yet that they faced outside of last week versus Detroit. In week 4, they allowed Jared Goff to put up 378 yards and 4 touchdowns, and he was without his 2 best weapons in Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift. TJ Hawkinson was tied in 1 on the week. In fact, he was the highest scoring player on the week with almost 40 fantasy points in PPR formats. If Chark and Amon-Ra were healthy, what sort of numbers do you guys think that they could have put up against this defense? Olave in the last 3 weeks is averaging 6 receptions on 11 targets for 98 yards and 0.3 touchdowns. He's also averaging 17.1 fantasy points per game. So for me, you got to start Chris Olave with confidence every week moving forward. He is the guy there, and I think you start him with confidence as a wide receiver 2 this week. My second start of the week, and I imagine we'll have a lot of questions about this guy as we did last week, is Chris Godwin versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons currently give up the 5th most points to fantasy wide receivers, and it was really good to see Chris Godwin back last week versus the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. He had a good game, a little injury scare, but he looked fine and he finished the game. 7 receptions on 10 targets for 59 yards in his first game back. Let's get on the same page, right? As long as Chris Godwin is healthy and Tom Brady is his quarterback, you must start him every single week. He should be considered a top 12 to 15 option on a weekly basis. And reminder, last year, when both Godwin and Evans were healthy, Godwin was by far the most targeted wide receiver. He out-targeted Evans on a per-game basis, 9 to 7.1. The difference with Tom Brady's game with Godwin and without Godwin is so obvious when you see it on the field. He is an irreplaceable piece. Start him with confidence versus the Falcons. They'll want to see Chris Godwin succeed and have him move forward for this playoff run. My next 2 starts of the week come from the same game and opposite sides of the ball. Number 3 start of the week is Curtis Samuel versus the Tennessee Titans. The Titans currently give up the 4th most points to fantasy wide receivers, and it was a very rough week for the Commanders last week versus Dallas. I mean, our offensive line couldn't keep Carson Wentz up for more than a second or 2. It was terrible. The reality is it's now or never for Carson Wentz in this offense. He will be the starter, and he continues to favor Curtis Samuel more than any other weapon in this offense. So far in 2022, Curtis Samuel is averaging 11.25 touches per game. Terry McLaurin is averaging 4.2 less touches per game. You got to trust the opportunities with a guy like Curtis Samuel, who had a down week technically last week, still had a good floor. This is a much better matchup, and he is the favorite weapon of Carson Wentz, so we could see a bounce back for all parties involved in Washington. And my 4th start of the week is Robert Woods at the Commanders, okay? Washington is truly awful. Probably the garbage can of the NFL right now. They give up the 3rd most points to fantasy wide receivers. As a Washington fan, I can't stress enough how terrible this franchise is in so many different ways. From the owner to the coaches to the defense to everything. It is truly awful. It broke my heart when Treylon Burks went down with that foot injury. Thank God it is not a season-ending injury. But right now, Robert Woods has no competition for targets. After a rough start, in the last 2 weeks, Woods is averaging 12.7 points per game, as well as 6.5 targets per game. So if Woods gets 7 targets versus this horrendous Washington defense, he could very well finish as a top 24 wide receiver here in week 5. My 5th start of the week is Devonta Smith at the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals currently give up the 8th fewest points to fantasy wide receivers. And I have to be honest, I wasn't very high on Devonta Smith coming into this year. My main concern was that there would be a lot of boom bust weeks, and AJ Brown's going to be the most consistent guy there, who's like kind of the target hog, if you will. I feel like that's been the case thus far. 2 games under 5 points, 2 games over 15, but this feels like a boom week to me. There simply isn't anyone in the secondary that can cover both AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. So both offenses can score. I think this is a high scoring game, and game script should be in favor for both of these offenses. I think this is a week in which you can start Devonta Smith, and I don't say that every single week. My 6th start of the week is Drake London at the Tampa Bay Bucks. And I know that this could be controversial because Tampa Bay is a very good defense. They actually give up the 15th fewest points to the position. So technically they're like right in the middle versus wide receivers. And it was a tough week last week for Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And for anyone who owns those two guys, I want to give you 2 reasons as to why and help you understand why there could be good things coming forward. Firstly, they faced the Browns last week, who could not stop the Atlanta rush to save their lives. Between Tyler Algier, Caleb Huntley, and Cordero Patterson, and the rest of this running back crew, the Falcons put up 202 rushing yards on 35 attempts, 5.8 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. Once the Falcons realized that they could win on the ground, that's all they did. Like, they didn't decide to throw the ball really much after that. And the negative part of being successful on the ground is that you don't really have a passing game. In fact, Mariota only had 7 completions in the entire game. Now you go to face Tampa Bay, which has Tom Brady, and now Tom Brady, this team is finally firing on all cylinders. You're going to need to throw the ball more often, and Drake London is going to be necessary, as well as Kyle Pitts, in this game for Atlanta to be considered even an option for a win. So start Drake London with confidence as a flex. And to end the video, I'm going to give you 3 sits of the week. The first one is going to be quite controversial, but hang in with me for a second. Sit Diontae Johnson at the Buffalo Bills. The Bills currently give up the 6th fewest points to fantasy wide receivers. And this is really tough because maybe you're in a position where you just clearly have to start Diontae. Like, if you don't have a clear option or you're not on the edge with another player, then of course start Diontae. But if you have other options that you could consider, like it's really close, I would maybe lean the other way this week. The matchup is awful, and the limited action with Kenny Pickett shows us that maybe Diontae is not the priority that he was for Mitch. Not to say that that will continue, but in the limited action, it was concerning. Let's look at the Steelers' target share with Kenny Pickett in the second half. He had 13 attempts. George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth had 30% of those attempts, and Diontae Johnson only 15%. So as of right now, we don't know. Like, could this trend continue? Maybe, but it's less even about, target share, and it's more about Kenny Pickett's first game versus a really good defense. I'm not sure I want to trust that. My second sit of the week is DJ Moore versus the 49ers. The Niners currently give up the 5th fewest points to fantasy wide receivers. DJ Moore for me was my biggest sell, like truly the biggest sell for me on our Dynasty channel this offseason. And there's a lot of DJ Moore truthers out there, and like it's just been rough. We have to be honest, it's been rough for DJ Moore this year. Last week was the matchup. We said it on the live stream. It was the matchup that he needed to break out. On 11 targets, he had 12 points. He has career lows this year. Efficiency doesn't look good. Versus the Niners, this isn't the matchup that I want to chase. And the third sit for me is literally any Giants wide receivers at the Packers. The Giants is Saquon Barkley. That's it. Packers give up the 9th fewest points to the position. There's no one you can trust. If you started Richie James for whatever reason, you probably shouldn't have, but here we are again. Don't start any Giants wide receivers. Just don't do it. There are better options out there. So why don't you guys comment down below? Let me know what starts that you like, that you dislike. Same with sits. Drop a like, leave any comments, and good luck this week here heading into week 5.
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos.
Watch it.
You can also subscribe.
Right now.
If you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/FantasyLand fam.